are seeing green
shoots even. Yep.
How you said
you
it
don't want to get that one wrong.
That's right. I think there's a change of environment that Luke Shaw talked about that was the first part of me taking notice of Manchester United this season. What he's saying about a more enjoyable environment, no stragglers, I think he used the word, at some players that weren't really fully committed. That on the back of a very good window with attacking players that are proven to come into a front line. Benjamin Šeško is going to be a very interesting prospect. We know that he's nowhere near the finished article. He's got a lot of development to come, but that's exciting for a new front three. They will be better. Now, whether expectations here at Old Trafford are going to get out of hand, that's happened before, and maybe they are, but they shouldn't be. They're definitely going to be better going forward. The system should be more comfortable now with the players. They're going to have a much better season.
Tim, they're 15th last season. They're 5th favourites for the title this. Is that crazy from what you saw at Summer Series and what you've seen in the summer transfer window?
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't be in the title conversation. But look, I think a better than good season would be them to get into Europe. And I agree with Musty. But look, Šeško, even if he's not the finished product, they have two really polished gems in Cunha and in Bomo underneath him to take the pressure off. At United, of course, being the number 9, there's a ton of pressure. And to be quite honest, to answer the question that you asked, Musty, you'll never get away from expectations at this place. I mean, I still shriek at being in here and remembering it being a young kid when I got here, and I just thought, you can never get away from that. And this team has enough about them that they can handle it, but there are always going to be expectations here.
It's intimidating, by the way, walking out of this tunnel as a broadcaster. I can't imagine what you felt as a home player and you two felt back in the day as an away player. It's an incredible cauldron, this, for sure. Robbie, let's talk about Arsenal, because we've mentioned Benjamin Šeško for Manchester United, 22 years of age, but they've got themselves, Arsenal, a more plug-in-and-play striker in Victor Gyökeres, would you say? And is he the answer they've been waiting for?
Well, the ceiling with Šeško, we'll have to wait and see at 22 years of age, can grow. You kind of know what you're going to get with Victor Gyökeres at 27 years of age. If service goes in the box, as we saw in the Emirates Cup a week ago, he's going to get his head on the ball. Everybody's been saying Arsenal need a centre-forward if they're going to win the title. They've got a centre-forward. So this season, and I don't think it's now or never for Mikel Arteta, but forget the project, forget the progress, silverware. Land a piece of silverware. And the title is the main aim. Domestic Cup would be important as well. But with this group now, I think people will say there isn't too many more excuses. We could give him a reason why before we can give him a reason why. You know, you've got Zubamendi in the middle of the field, who's going to be so important to that midfield with his experience. You've got the guy at the top end of the pitch who can score the goals. You kind of feel like, Arsenal, now's your time.
Totally agree. And I think it is their time. I think it's their turn. I think they've been very close. I think they've built very carefully from the back to defence to midfield. They have strengthened up front. They've strengthened with Madueke as covering player. Norgard Zubamendi in midfield is very silky. He's going to be very good in terms of possession. They're ready to win it. I noticed the last game before the season start, a very strong team. They're all ready to go. Gyökeres has scored. Saka looks fit. I just think they've got cover in all spots, and I think it's going to be their season.
The problem with the start of a season is that everybody has expectations. And everybody...
Yeah, welcome back to Sunday Supplement, and welcome back to Miguel Delaney, Charlotte Dunker and Jonathan Liu. Let's go to the back page of The Sun and what looks like a pretty surprising story, Charlotte. Back in the frame, legend David De Gea is an option for Ruben Amorim. Did you see this one coming?
No. I think this morning when we were talking about it before we came on air and someone suggested it, I was like, pardon? And it seems like the obvious link was that he was back at Old Trafford last Saturday playing a friendly, and Manchester United have remembered that actually he's an all right shot stopper, and maybe he is a better shot stopper than the guy that they have there at the moment. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. Could I see it happening? I mean, it doesn't seem very likely at the moment. Whenever you talk to Manchester United about the goalkeeper position at the moment, they're saying it's not a priority. But the main reason it's not a priority is because Onana's still there. And Onana's obviously had a lot of interest this summer, particularly from Saudi. But he and his camp are saying he's determined to stay at Manchester United. Amorim's quotes in his press conference on Friday didn't give him any assurances that he's necessarily going to be the first choice goalkeeper. But then if you look at who Manchester United have in their goalkeeping department, if he's not going to be the first choice, then they do need to bring someone else in, because Bayinda, when he's played, hasn't really filled anyone with much confidence. Tom Heaton's a great leadership guy to have around the club. Is he going to be Manchester United's first choice goalkeeper as they aim to get back on track? No. There's been the obvious links to Donnarumma. I think De Gea being thrown in there as a bit of a wild card. If we go back to obviously when he left, I think a lot of Manchester United fans, not that they weren't disappointed to see him leave, but I think there was a feeling that maybe it'd come to the end of the time. I think there was a bit of disappointment with how it ended in terms of he obviously didn't get the goodbye that people were expecting. He was sort of pushed out the back door a bit. You can see on the back page there he was presented with that frame last week because he never got that big goodbye after, and he'd been at the club for so long. But is he the solution for them in net? I'd argue not. It seems that they'd be going backwards a bit.
Alan Nixon is the reporter who's done this article, and he says that the Manchester United have been tipped off that he's got a clause in his deal allowing him to leave for a relatively small sum. The goalkeeping department generally, you're either brilliant at shot stopping or brilliant with your feet. How difficult is it to find both at the moment?
It is, and I think certainly the game went through a phase about maybe a decade ago where there was a real dearth of top quality keepers because of this splintering of the role into what you might call pure shot stoppers and players who could play with their feet, and there were very few who could do both. Then obviously you get guys like Edison and Alisson who became world class, who lit up the Premier League for years, and I think these days that divide is less valid. I mean, we might talk about Donnarumma later. There's this idea that Donnarumma can play with his feet. He's much better with his feet than most goalkeepers of 10 years ago. But because he's also a great shot stopper, I think he gets that's partly why he's not in Luis Enrique's plans at PSG. And I think when United moved on from De Gea, they were almost. It was almost moving on from that model of goalkeeper as well. Onana was seen to be a lot better with his feet. It's certainly more conducive to the sort of the possession style, playing out from the back style that they wanted. So going back to him, unless it's just as a number two, or somebody to bring through the young keepers, although he wouldn't be on number two wages, but that makes sense. But if they're going back to the whole De Gea goalkeeping model, I think that suggests a bigger shift.
But then if they brought him back in as a number, surely they're only going to bring him back in if Onana leaves. If Onana leaves, De Gea's not going to be a first choice goalkeeper. So who is? Out of those three that we just mentioned, none of them, arguably. Onana is probably the best at for what Manchester United want to do under Amorim and the style they want to play. Onana is the best suited for that. Is he the best goalkeeper in the league? Of course he's not. But out of that pool that we've just mentioned, he's probably best suited to what Amorim wants to do right now.
I mean, well, on that as well, I mean, Amorim, OK, he's not as dogmatic as Ten Hag was about this, and this is one of the reasons why Onana's at the club, because United so committed briefly to Ten Hag's approach. But, I mean, De Gea, we did see him try to play this approach with Spain, say, in the 2018 World Cup. I remember seeing it at the time. You could almost see the kind of, not quite the panic, but it was very clear that Piqué and Sergio Ramos and staff didn't really trust De Gea with his feet in the way that, they had been used to with Victor Valdez or even Iker Casillas before that. So, and OK, again, Amorim isn't as pronounced in this approach, but it's part of the modern game now. And that's why it's difficult to see him being much more than a kind of an alternative.
Yeah, I'm sure all eyes will be not only on the goalkeepers, but everything at Old Trafford this afternoon, including Arsenal's title challenge. And in the Sunday Express, I think we've seen this headline before, haven't we? Gonna be our year. Tougher Timbers title talk. Miguel, are they equipped to take that final step instead of being thereabouts to being there?
I think so. I think they're really, I mean, look, they've been brilliant for 3 years. I know that 3 years has seen a lot of debate about Arteta, whether he's a winner in all this, whether he's a good manager, but one that can't get them quite over the line. I think they've been a little bit unfortunate over that period. I mean, they got 89 points in 22-23. Arteta is the only manager in the Premier League history to have had an 89-point season and not also won the league at some other point. But I think that speaks to how difficult it was. They were up against City, and not all that project is at its most imperious. Last season, I think you could say, was the big opportunity because City obviously had their crisis. But from speaking to people at Arsenal, I think they do see what happened last season as explainable. There were some issues in the squad they didn't resolve. But most of all, they suddenly had these injury clusters that they didn't have in the previous 2 seasons. And as Arsenal put it, for all the debate about kind of, the style and the approach and whether they're aggressive, whether it became a set-piece team, if you look, say, I mean, they scored, 90...
In charge of United at Ipswich last November, it was clear he was having to direct players to take up the positions he wanted. There was some confusion, he said later, and that confusion is still present in some phases of games. With United out of Europe this season, they will only play one game per week, and that will mean more time on the training pitch for Amram and his players. This is important not only for integrating new players into the setup but also so Amram can do more of his detailed tactical walkthroughs. Players are physically moved into specific positions for phases with and without the ball. It is vital his messaging now translates into games. The thing I like the most is now there's going to be no excuses, Diogo Dalot, one of the newly appointed six-man leadership group, said last week. Ultimately, the thing that will define us is what we do on the pitch. I think what is going to bring joy to the fans, joy to ourselves, is winning games.